Hello, this is Bruce Pardall giving the second of a series of talks that I'm doing on the global economy, the U.S. economy, where they have been, what their present is constituted by, and what the shape of things to come is. I actually began by doing this last segment, part one, summarizing, mostly statistically, what the global economy and the U.S. economy are characterized by today. Before launching into the development of the crisis, which I don't think can be understood without actually talking about the U.S. and global economies or certain aspects of them since World War II. Before we go to that, I'm just going to mention a couple of things that I should have included last time, I think. Now, as I make this recording, there's lots of talk about the fiscal cliff going on. Today is December 6th that I'm giving this talk. And the fiscal cliff is nothing other than the austerity issue that so many of you have heard about in Europe, and the enforcement of austerity budgets on countries that are requesting to be bailed out, and how Angela Merkel, the president or prime minister of Germany, has been behind much of that because Germany is the richest nation, and the European Central Bank in the Eurozone doesn't work like ours. Our bank can, our Federal Reserve Bank can print money at will. That cannot be done in Europe. It's basically they all have to conference together in the European Council, and then the European Commission makes a decision about how much money is to be added to their central bank, and they're highly dependent on the wealthiest nations actually to give them the money that will then be dispensed to countries that need bailing out. When they talk about the fiscal cliff in the United States, it's not so dramatic. It should be characterized as a fiscal slide. What it means basically is that when bills come due, if there's not tax revenue for it, then programs have to be cut away. And that, of course, is what the Republicans are really aiming for. Inasmuch as there's anything resembling a fiscal cliff, that cliff is something that we ordinary people would fall over, not the very rich. Austerity is all about the rich keeping money, investing on it, or otherwise sitting on it, which is a great deal of that is going on in the world today. In Europe, this is called the sovereign debt crisis. So we in the United States have a sovereign debt crisis. What it means is that the government owes more money than the gross domestic product. The gross domestic product is the total sale of goods and services in a given country each year. What it further means is that we don't have the revenue to pay our bills each year. That's nothing new, and we borrow usually in the form of selling U.S. Treasury bonds. Actually, the United States even sells mortgage securities as well, ones that are prime rate. But mostly we should think of like the U.S. debt as being constituted by bondholders that we have to pay back. And so what's happening with Greece, to just give a very broad outline, is that certainly Greece's gross domestic product is actually much smaller than the total amount of debt that they have accumulated over the years. And what's happening is a vicious circle, basically. They are being told by the European Commission of the Eurozone, of the European Central Bank, that they have to radically cut back their social budgets. And many of you know that humongous general strikes have been called in Greece as a result of this. And then the whole idea is because Greece is in such bad trouble, in order for it to borrow money, right, it must issue bonds. And those bonds, in turn, have to be high interest bonds. Well, if you're a country that's broke already, okay, and you're issuing bonds in which you're promising to pay a lot of interest on, how do you get going when you have a 25% unemployment rate, when austerity cuts out government workers who are among the best off workers of all? That's what an austerity budget does. It cuts away a lot of government workers, okay? And in turn, it cuts off subsidies that governments give to certain businesses. In any event, once money is less available to businesses, employment goes down. So what happens is the next year, since employment has gone down, the tax revenue that you get is even less than it was last year, and therefore you're even deeper in the crisis. It's a virtual circle, a vicious circle, and I hope that I rendered that sufficiently understandable. I would just add, too, that the United States has now joined other countries like Spain and Italy, and its debt exceeds its gross domestic product. It's now about $16 trillion. It's an immense, immense, immense federal debt that we have. And just think about that, the gross domestic product being comprised by the total sales of all goods and services in a country for a year. Anyway, again, the United States is part of the sovereign debt crisis also. And whereas you have investors snapping up U.S. Treasury bonds, their yields, their interests are very, very, very low right now. And the reason they're being snatched up is that there has been the perpetual legend that the safest investment in the world is U.S. Treasury bonds, because the U.S. always pays its debt. Yet, as I mentioned last time, Moody's has lowered the rating of U.S. currency because of our debts. It has lowered it. All right. Having said those words, and hopefully brought us a little bit more up to date, I'm going to go to the past. Understanding the crisis of today, as I mentioned before, means understanding what happened after World War II. World War II concludes. Basically, you have a destroyed world. You have a physical plant, especially in the means of production, that is destroyed everywhere except in neutral nations, which are very small, and the United States of America. World War II never came to the shores of the United States of America. We have a fully going, robust, high level of heavy industry. We have 100% employment going on. So anyway, Europe is a wreck. That is a wonderful opportunity for the United States of America. And 1 year before World War II ended, and the great powers were anticipating a new order, they had something called the Bretton Woods Agreement. And the main design of it was done by John Maynard Keynes, who is, most people would agree, is the greatest capitalist economist perhaps that ever lived, or the greatest one since Adam Smith. And the system that Keynes and his partners devised was a system in which the world's reserve currency would be the U.S. dollar. However, the U.S. dollar would be backed up by gold completely. And that basically rendered the world currency situation more or less stable. It is true that there could be fluctuations in currencies if the productivity of a given country is lower than, say, the United States. So, for example, if the United States is manufacturing balloons for 25 cents, but the Greeks are manufacturing them at a cost of 35 cents, their currency could go down if that trend was also reproduced in other parts of its economy.